on this edition for Sunday, June 14th, Atlanta, Georgia, rocked by the police shooting of a black man. As nationwide protests over the death of George Floyd continue. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
Consumer Cellular offers no-contract wireless plans that are designed to help you do more of the things you enjoy. Whether you're a talker, texter, browser, photographer, or a bit of everything, our U.S.-based customer service team is here to find a plan that fits you. To learn more, go to consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Protests in Atlanta continue today over the death of Rayshard Brooks, a black man who was fatally shot by a white police officer in a Wendy's parking lot on Friday night. The shooting has led to the firing of that officer and the resignation of Atlanta's police chief. Extensive video of the incident has been released by authorities showing how what started as a calm interaction after a 911 call about a man being asleep in his car in a drive-through lane turned violent. A warning to viewers that the video is graphic.
Put your mouth over the mouthpiece, pull as hard as you can until I tell you to stop.
After administering a breathalyzer, which read .108, just over the legal limit of .08, Atlanta police officers Garrett Rolfe and Devin Brosnan attempt to arrest Brooks.
Here, put your hands behind your butt.
Caught on the dash cam of the police car, Brooks struggles with the officers, who both pull out their tasers during the confrontation. He's then seen grabbing a taser from one of the officers and fleeing. In surveillance video from the restaurant, Brooks is seen running, then turning briefly with the taser in his hand, possibly firing it in the direction of the officer while running. Rolfe, the officer behind him, then quickly draws his gun and fires 3 shots at Brooks, who is still running away. 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks died later Friday night after being taken to an Atlanta hospital. Atlanta police announced late Saturday night that the officer who shot Brooks has been fired and the other officer has been placed on administrative leave. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation is conducting an independent investigation into the shooting. At a press conference yesterday afternoon, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms said she did not believe the shooting was justified and that Atlanta Police Chief Erica Shields was no longer in charge of the department.
Chief Shields has offered to immediately step aside as police chief so that the city may move forward with urgency in rebuilding the trust so desperately needed throughout our communities.
Today, protesters gathered at the Wendy's where the shooting took place. It was set on fire during protests last night. For more, I'm joined by Leah Fleming, a host and correspondent with Georgia Public Broadcasting. Leah, are you surprised with the turn of events in the last 24 hours?
Yes, I am surprised at what has happened in Atlanta. After several days and nights of relatively peaceful protests with zero arrests, things have been going pretty well. The protests have certainly continued in the wake of the George Floyd killing, but they were peaceful and they were productive. And there were conversations of turning those protests more toward other actions, working with the city to begin to really address the systemic problem of police brutality toward African Americans and the systemic problem of racism in general. But things took a very ugly turn last night. And this is, of course, in result to the killing of Rayshard Brooks. And suddenly things took a turn and the city, that part of the city went up in flames, literally. The Wendy's outside where he was killed, that Wendy's was set on fire. There were several other smaller fires that were set in the area. The fire department couldn't get close to even beginning to put out those fires for over an hour because protesters blocked their way. So they couldn't do that. Protesters also made their way up an embankment onto I-75, which is a major thoroughfare interstate that cuts through the city of Atlanta. So traffic was held up for miles. So things, I would describe what we saw last night as rage. And that rage just reemerged in the wake of this killing of yet another Black man at the hands of police.
What do you think of the resignation of the police chief?
So Erica Shields was the police chief, and she served for over 3.5 years in that role. She actually was very popular among, she had a great working relationship with Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. She has a great working relationship with her colleagues in the police force. She also worked well within the community. The communities that she served. She was known to be tough on crime. Her first year in the role of police chief, serving in 2017, that entire year, she brought down major crimes by 8%, according to FBI statistics. She also brought down murders by 29%. But she was also known to be compassionate, and she was known to be a listener in the community, that she would, over the past few weeks during the protests surrounding the death of George Floyd, she was actually seen out there at the protests talking to demonstrators and, more importantly, listening to demonstrators. So it was somewhat of a surprise that after the killing of Mr. Brooks on a Friday night, by Saturday morning, the NAACP of Georgia was calling for her to immediately step down. And then by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she offered her resignation to the mayor.
You are in a position where you were part of the conversation of the city. In the wake of George Floyd, what are some of the hopeful things that you have heard and seen about people coming to some agreements, and what is the events of the last 24, 36 hours due to that?
I think what has been positive is the fact that there have been so many people of all races and backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, that have come out to protest, and they're not going anywhere. Those protests have continued religiously, day after day in this city, and people seem more unified than ever as a city to address this problem. And that is a powerful thing to see, that didn't just end after the arrest of the officers in Minneapolis. So that has been wonderful to see. This moment, I think, is going to cause more growth, ultimately more growth. But it hurt. It hurt the community. You saw that when you saw that rage come out last night in the protests. This morning, looking at the scene around Wendy's, where Mr. Brooks died, where there will be the scene of more protests today, you saw people come out. There are people out there that are taking pictures and walking around talking. There was a sense of just sadness around that scene today. So to say people are sick and tired of being sick and tired is really an understatement. There is just a sorrow that is going through that community right now. The people that were out there on this beautiful Sunday morning, a very peaceful one, but just sad. And so I think we have a long way to go in Atlanta in terms of beginning to build trust with the police.
Leah Fleming from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Joining me now is the president and CEO of the National Urban League and former mayor of New Orleans, Mark Morial. Mark, we're just a couple of weeks after George Floyd, after Atlanta saw the protests, the response, and here we are, another use of deadly force video that shows up. What goes through your mind?
A lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of how can this happen again? Is my immediate response. But second to that, it underscores why we need a reimagination, a restructuring, and a new accountability system for American policing. American policing is, for the most part, broken. People can pick the word they want, but we need changes at the national level, and we need new initiatives and new ways of doing business at the local level. This is not where one sweeping federal bill will fix this problem, but a sweeping federal bill is essential to address many of the accountability challenges. And that's why the Justice in Policing Act is something we strongly support, introduced this past week in the Congress. And I don't have an appetite for a watered down version. I don't have an appetite for a symbolic bill. I think we've got to hear the pain, the cries, and the determination of the American people from all walks of life, all races and backgrounds, who are on the streets saying Black Lives Matter.
This is certainly not in the same vein as George Floyd. There are different circumstances which are going to lead a lot of people to say, hey, you know what? I saw the Wendy's parking lot surveillance footage, and this gentleman turned around and he pointed a taser. This is different. The police officer felt that their life was threatened, that they should have been able to protect themselves.
Yeah, police officers are trained and taught that the taser is a non-lethal weapon. And the officers had searched the gentleman when he got out of the car to determine, because they asked him, are you armed? And they determined that he was not armed. So for him to turn around and shoot a taser at the officer did not constitute a threat to the officer's life or a threat to another officer's life. Perhaps the officer was amped up because this man had taken the taser away from him and began to flee. So yeah, officers make split-second decisions, but at no instance was anyone's life threatened. And force is only, I think, necessary if the officer's life is truly threatened, or number two, if the life of a citizen or someone else is threatened.
What could they have done differently?
If we are going to talk about de-escalation, then we have to rethink, and this is what's important, how we handle various types of incidents, whether it's with homelessness, whether it's people on the street who may have mental issues. If those are appropriate things for the police to respond to. Police have been asked to do things far beyond the traditional role of public safety and policing. And the reimagination movement, or the reimagination and restructuring movement, I think rightfully has to think about some of these classes of offenses differently. Some of them are not truly criminal offenses. And so we've got to rethink this, and they could have done that. And he could have not used his gun. Look, how far was that gentleman going to run?
What we've also seen in the last couple of weeks is a closing of the ranks by different police agencies. In Buffalo, for example, you had all the members of the emergency response team resign from that unit, but not from the police department, in solidarity with the two individuals who were reprimanded for pushing down an old man. In Florida, you had another case recently of members resigning from the SWAT team because they feel their actions are now being politicized, and they don't feel like they can do their jobs as with the force that might be necessary if, myself included, if we're going to have these conversations looking over their shoulder on Sunday morning.
It is the right of the public and the people to look over the shoulders of public officials and public servants. It is. No one should be immune from that. Not the police officer, not the firefighter, not the tax collector, not the director of building permits. I don't think we should offer the police officer some sort of exalted position in American life where they have super duper protections, super insulations, and that's been part of the culture. Those officers, if they do not have confidence, should not have resigned from the SWAT team or resigned from the unit. They should resign from the force. If officers can't take this trip, if they can't move in the direction that I believe American policing is going to move, then I think they should resign and find something else to go do. We've got to think about the hiring process. We've got to think about the training process, and we've got to think about the scope and the charge of policing and public safety. And I think, too, what's implicit in this, and I strongly support the investments we need to make in youth. and social services in schools. A response to every single problem can't be, let's put more police in the neighborhood. I believe you have to have smart policing, progressive policing, community policing, a strategy around public safety, but it includes so many other things. And that's the debate, I think, in the discussion that we need to have in the United States today.
One of the central tenets to me is, regardless of how much money you pour into police retraining, implicit bias training, de-escalation training, and so forth, how do you switch a culture that values, and sometimes rightfully, loyalty? Like they say, hey, I need to know that you have my back, that if we go into a dangerous situation, I can count on you. And that ends up creating a scenario where good police are standing by when something bad happens because they feel like if I turn on my brother or sister now, they might not be there for me when I really need them.
Even in that instance, there's a place where you have to draw a line. And the line involves not lying, not covering up, not looking the other way when you know a partner of yours or a coworker has done something that's obviously wrong. Corruption means that wrongdoing is unchecked, that wrongdoing becomes the culture. So people should understand that there are lines to be drawn in every single institution. We have to rethink and we have to reform and we have to restructure. And look, I'm confident that we can get something that protects the public safety, respects citizens, and creates new confidence. But these reforms are not going to be able to operate around the edges in most departments because it's central to what we need in American communities today. And look, I think that police have been asked to do too many things. Well, we need to talk to communities and say, what type of situations should be handled by maybe another unit or another department or another instrument or instrumentality of government? And I think those are the kind of conversations that communities have to have in a reimagination. Look, I don't think people should underestimate the power of this movement that we see manifested in the streets. It's touched the boardrooms of America. It's touched the legislative bodies of America. And yeah, there's probably a segment of the American population which is kicking and screaming and doesn't support it. But my sense is that this is a movement unlike any I've seen in my adult life to undo racism, to restructure the society. It's not a Black movement. It's not a white movement. It's not a Latino movement. It's not an Asian movement. It's not a movement of young versus old. It's being propelled by the young. But it is a movement against racism and a movement against division and intolerance in this country. And so we have a chance. In the short run, I want to see Congress pass the Justice and Policing Act. I testified before the House Judiciary Committee. It's the kind of reform measure Congress should pass. It's not going to fix or do all the things we discussed, but Congress has to put its stamp on this issue by saying, we realize we need to take a giant leap forward when it comes to American policing in terms of creating accountabilities, responsibilities, and systems that will assist local communities in doing what they need to do.
Mark Morial, the Urban League, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
For more on the situation in Atlanta and the latest on protests around the country, visit pbs.org/newshour. Reaction to the police killing of Rayshard Brooks was immediate, with politicians taking to the Sunday talk shows to weigh in ahead of debate on proposed legislation this week that's focused on reforming and retraining police.
This did not call for lethal force. And I don't know what's in the culture that would make this guy do that. It's got to be the culture. It's got to be the system.
One of the challenges that we have in these split-second decisions is the need for more training. That's why the de-escalation aspect of my bill and the House bill is so critically important, so that we don't revert back to basic fear plus adrenaline leads us to the genetic code, so to speak. That's a hard balance to achieve. So in order for us to provide more opportunities to de-escalate these situations and to reduce the use of force, we have to have effective training.
And we need to look at appropriate reforms and this is probably a good time to shine a spotlight on it and get it done.
We need reformation of how police officers do their jobs, how law enforcement does its job. But I also know that we have to have a transformation of how we view the role of law enforcement, how we view the construct of public safety, and how we invest not only in the work that we need them to do to protect us, but the work we need to protect and build our communities.
The demands for racial justice and police reform are continuing every day across the country, more than 3 weeks after George Floyd was killed on Memorial Day in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In Nashville, Tennessee, protesters called for change last night.
George Floyd, police brutality is about wanting to see changes in the police scene here in Nashville.
Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
In South Carolina, members of the Clemson University football team led a march and held an 8-minute and 46-second moment of silence, the length of time that Floyd was held down before he died. And in Los Angeles today, black leaders in the LGBTQ community organized an all Black Lives Matter solidarity march in honor of Tony McDade, a black transgender man who was shot and killed by a Tallahassee police officer last month. The U.S. Secret Service reversed an earlier statement that it did not use any chemical sprays to remove peaceful protesters in a public square across from the White House earlier this month. In a tweet yesterday, the Secret Service acknowledged an agency employee used pepper spray on what it said was, quote, an assaultive individual in advance of President Trump's walk through Lafayette Square to a nearby church for photos. Finally tonight, a first-hand account from Isaac Bryan, a civil rights activist and director of public policy at UCLA's Bunch Center, on what it means for him to be part of this pivotal moment in history. It's part of KCET's series, I Was There.
My name is Isaac Bryan. I'm the director of public policy at the Ralph J. Bunch Center for African American Studies at UCLA. I'm also the director of the Black Policy Project at UCLA. ...2020 may become one of the momentous years of an entire generation. The protest right outside of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's house was not publicized. We know that law enforcement has been brutal to many organizers in the city. I have been brutalized by law enforcement during these times of protest. And so the idea of marching on the mayor's house in peaceful protest, we were quite frankly scared of what could be lethal repercussions.
It was one of the most beautiful and powerful things I've ever been a part of. It was well organized. We spent time organizing it. Thousands of people were in the streets. We chanted, we sang, we did the electric slide. I want to give a special shout out to Common for coming out. We were met by law enforcement, clearly a message of standing off and standing back is starting to resonate with the LAPD.
This moment right now is a culmination of personal and professional experiences in my life coming together. My origin begins in Dallas, Texas in the early 90s. I'm the product of a violent attack on a teenage mother who lived in poverty. And that ultimately forced me to come into early contact with the child welfare system. And when I was in middle school, I was suspended 7 or 8 times. I was pushed out of school despite being in a gifted and talented program. I didn't graduate middle school. In fact, I struggled so hard that I almost didn't make it to college. I accepted the offer at UCLA and I got my master's in public policy. I graduated top of my class out here and I worked for Mayor Eric Garcetti in the Office of Reentry for a couple of years. I've been out in the streets. I have been in the halls of power negotiating change, and I've been on the front lines of organizing. As someone who has moved between different spaces, I can tell you right now is the space for organizing. It is the space for protesting. It is the space for exclaiming just how upset we are. We saw a man murdered on camera for the umpteenth time. And it's not training that's going to fix that.
We need our leaders to be inspiring, to be bold, and to push for actions that might seem uncomfortable, but are very, very necessary.
And that is the end of my rant.
Join us tomorrow evening for a NewsHour Weekend special on race and policing, America in Black and Blue 2020 at 9 p.m. Eastern and at PBS Online. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. For the latest news updates, visit pbs.org/newshour. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.